Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. So the true meaning of creation. Indeed, people witness God to originate things and cause others to perish, such as semen out of which God originates man, and grain out of which he originates plants. So does air totally change into fire or water, and burning fire into originating smoke. This way is the exalted God always creating what he wills to originate and bring into existence, and annihilating what he wills to destroy and remove out of existence. Hence, when man dies and becomes part of the earth, he will have totally perished and ceased to exist, just as all others upon the earth will. God says everyone upon it will perish. He will then resurrect him out of the earth by creating him again, just as he did before, although the second creation will differ in its rulings and qualities. Indeed, knowing one's first creation, and that God creates the sons of Adam and other the living things, trees, fruits, clouds, and rain, is a basis to knowing creation and resurrection, origin and return. For unless man knows that God creates him in his entirety out of semen, both his components and his attributes, he will not know that God created him. And whoever believes, as the Kalam theologians do, that his components are not created in the process of his creation, but that the atoms of semen and those of food and drink continue to exist, or believes, as philosophers do, that the matter in which his form subsists is not created in the process, but is eternally there, has not known that he is created by God. And scholars criticize people who associate themselves with Islam and yet claim that souls have always existed. But the philosophers who claim that the matter of their bodies has always existed are farther away from reason and revelation. And the former are criticized for saying that man is composed of an eternal divine component and an originated human component, whereas the latter more seriously claim that man is composed of eternal matter and originating form. They so deem eternal the lowest of his components, whereas the former better deem eternal the nobler component, namely the rational soul. Although both groups are astray in claiming that an eternal thing exists besides God, a nobler component is worthier of being eternal than a lower one is, and a lower one is worthier of being originated. As for the Kalam theologians who follow the Jahmiyya, they do not perceive any of those concrete things around them to originate out of others and in their place. They then claim that all concrete things are originated out of nothing, although they do not know of a single case in which things originate out of nothing. And the reality of their claim is that God originates neither substances nor accidents out of others. Rather, they believe that all is originating out of nothing. But in truth, people witness God to create things out of others, not out of nothing. This is why the exalted God says, I created you before while you were nothing, but does not say, I created you out of nothing. And this is why he says, God created every animal out of water, but does not say that he created animals out of nothing. Likewise, he says, he made every living thing out of water. And this is the power of God, which amazes the intellects of men. It is his power to turn the realities of existence into others, by totally changing one thing into another, causing it to perish and originating something else. As he says, indeed, God is the cleaver of grain and date seeds. He brings the living out of the dead and brings the dead out of the living. He so brings living trees and spikes out of dead date seeds and grain, and brings dead seeds and grain out of living trees and spikes. Similarly, he creates a living man out of dead sperm, and dead sperm out of a living man. According to Kalam theologians, however, God does not bring anything living out of anything dead. This is because the living thing is the concrete object, not its attributes of life. Life is an accident. meaning that it subsists in the object and does not subsist on its own. Life also does not subsist in other accidents. It only subsists in the object it describes. Still, it may describe accidents in a strictly figurative sense, such as when we say that knowledge and faith came to life, or that justice and prophetic traditions have been revived. Equally, it may be said that one kills heresy. But according to those Kalam theologians, God does not bring substances into existence out of others. Rather, the very substance of the dead thing continues to exist in the living thing. That substance is only given life, and that life is not originated out of the substance. It so follows that nothing living is brought out of anything dead, and that nothing dead is brought out of anything living. And this is why they deny that God may turn things of one class into things of a different class. They claim instead that all bodies are identical and of one class. When God creates man from a sperm drop, for example, he does not turn one class into another. Rather, the very substance continues to exist without change. In truth, however, the key feature of God's creative agency is to turn one thing of some class into another thing of a different class. None can do this but God, just as he says, "O people, an example is presented, so listen to it. Indeed, those you invoke besides God will never create as much as a fly, even if they gathered together for that purpose. And if the fly should steal away from them a tiny thing, they could not rescue it from it. So weak are both the seeker and the sought. They have not appraised God with true appraisal. Indeed, God is powerful and exalted in might. And it is without doubt that neither trees are the same class as date seeds, nor spikes of the same class as grain, nor man of the same class as semen, nor semen of the same class as man. Still, God creates this out of that, and that out of this. He therefore brings every class out of another, very different one. And this is the creation of God. So show me that which those beside him have created. And he creates things out of their opposites, such as when he makes fire out of green trees. For when he causes green trees to be rubbed together, he originates heat out of such motion, until the very green tree changes into a burning fire. Indeed, creating one thing of some class out of another of a different class more strongly indicates the power of God, the exalted creator, than creating it out of nothing. Just as he describes himself in saying, "Say, O God, owner of sovereignty, you give sovereignty to whom you will, and you take sovereignty away from whom you will. You honor whom you will, and you humble whom you will. In your hand is all good. Indeed, you are over all things competent. You cause the night to enter the day, and you cause the day to enter the night. And you bring the living out of the dead, and you bring the dead out of the living. And you give provision to whom you will without account." And for this reason did God say to the angels, "Indeed, I am about to create a human being out of clay. So when I have proportioned him and breathed into him of my spirit, then fall down to him in prostration, and say, Did we not create you out of a fluid disdained, which we laid up in a safe abode for a known term? Thus we determined it. So how excellent are we to determine? And for this reason did the accursed Satan, reject God's command. God says, and mention when we said to the angels, prostrate to Adam, and they prostrated except for Iblis. He said, should I prostrate to one you created from clay? And he mentions that Iblis said, never would I prostrate to a human being you created out of clay from an altered black mud. Furthermore, a creature created out of another more strongly indicates its servitude and dependence on its Lord, and is farther away from being equal to its Lord than a creature created out of nothing. This is because the Lord alone is the one eternal refuge, independent of sustenance, who neither begets nor is born, and who has no equivalent. He so does not exist out of some origin, and nothing at all produces out of him. Indeed, if creatures began to exist out of origins, those origins will be somewhat like fathers. If things then produce out of them, they will be somewhat like their sons. In this way, if all of God's creatures beget and are begotten, they will be farther away from being equal to their Lord. For unlike God, they will have come out of origins and others will have come out of them. This servitude is especially true if they are created out of a disdained origin. As the exalted God says, "Did we not create you out of a fluid disdained?" And says, "So let man observe from what he was created. He was created out of a gushing fluid, emerging from between the backbone and the ribs. Indeed, God is able to return him to life. On that day when secrets will be put on trial, then will he have no might nor any helper." And in the Musnad of Ahmad ibn Hanbal, it is recorded that Busr narrated that the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam spat in his palm and placed his fingers on it and said, "God says, O son of Adam, do you think you can escape me when I have created you out of something like this? By the time I have proportioned you, you are walking in 2 garments and striking the ground, accumulating wealth and preventing charity. But when your soul reaches your throat, you will say, I will give charity. How is it not then late for charity? Moreover, a creature created in dark and confined space, as is man created in the 3 darknesses of his mother's womb, more strongly indicates God's power and its servitude, humility, and dependence on its Lord. And when Christ was created without a father, a group of people fell into error and made him into a son of God, although he was created out of his mother's substance, and the soul breathed into her. As God says, and Mary, the daughter of Imran, who guarded her chastity, so we blew therein of our spirit. And he says, then we sent to her our angel, and he assumed for her the likeness of a perfect man. She said, indeed, I seek refuge in the most merciful from you, if you should be God-fearing. He said, I am only the messenger of your Lord to give you news of a pure boy. Indeed, a thing created without a father could be mistaken by someone as a begotten son of God, or even as created by God out of his own essence. And this is why the prophets were created out of preceding things and had both origins and offsprings, fathers and sons, whereas God alone is the eternal refuge, who neither begets nor is begotten, and has no equal. Also, a thing originating ex nihilo is somewhat similar to a thing originating without an originator, and may also be mistaken as originating out of God's essence, just as it is wrongly thought about Christ and the angels. For when angels had no fathers, some pagans wrongly claimed that they are daughters of God, although angels were surely created out of matter. For it is authentically recorded in the Sahih of Muslim that Aisha, may Allah be pleased with her, narrated that the Prophet ﷺ said, angels were created out of light, spirits created out of smokeless fire, and Adam was created out of that which has been described for you. Finished.